Kevin to kick off the introduction for Ben.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good to see you again. Sean Denniston, I think many of you are already aware, has left NBI. He's pursuing some work, I think working as his own consultant. So the PI on the project now will be Ben Rabe, who is joining us today. And Ben's been on a few calls before, so I think some of you have probably met Ben, but Ben is the associate director or an associate director of the Codes and Policy team. Ben is also the project manager on our other RECCE project, the one helping DC develop a net zero energy code. So he's very familiar with DOE project management stuff. Anything you want to add, Ben?
No, that sounds great. I guess an important thing to note is day to day, Kevin will be leading this project, and as far as project management, we're doing most of the coordination with you all and other partners. I will be on for more of the technical piece, and especially when it comes to the code writing, as well as providing consistency between the other RECCE project that NBI is leading, as well as the 5 others that we're priming, and potentially 3 more that we're submitting proposals on. So hoping we can do the best to share best practices among those. Thanks.
Muted myself and didn't unmute. So welcome, Ben. and as you know, this is the steering committee for our Southwest RECCE grant. So this is a blend of both the technical partners, which are our subrecipients, as well as the jurisdictions that really kind of led the creation of this collaboration from the very beginning. So it's a really, really, really phenomenal group of folks that we're getting to work with here. All right, so moving on to item 2, we finally have our RECCE award in hand. I know it has been a long journey, 9.5 months. I keep pointing out it's like the length of a pregnancy that it took them to get it all done, but we do have our paperwork. And so because we did lose basically 7 months of time that we could not go full steam ahead on the project, we are going to do an adjustment to the scope of work. We've talked about a no cost extension to basically the timeline. And we've had some individual conversations with the technical partners. Seems like a 6-month extension is going to work for everyone, in part because we do have our paperwork, but we're also headed into the summer. And for those of you who spend any amount of time here and tried to do community engagement in the summer, you know how close to impossible that is. So the 6-month extension will give us a little more time to do some planning and then really kind of kick things off publicly in kind of the late August, early September timeframe. So Kevin and I have kicked around. There are a couple of different ways we could approach this in terms of like the actual change to the paperwork. Some are easier than others, but some are also less or more preferred by DOE. So Kevin's thrown out the easiest option to see what DOE thinks. But then we've got a plan B figured out, and I think a plan C, a plan D. So I think there's 4 or 5 different ways we could approach it. So right now we're going to figure that out, and then hopefully have all of that, like the actual adjustment, done by the end of June. Kevin, you want to add anything on award or?
I would just say the subcontracts are in the process of getting signed. I think I've only received 4 of them back, so there's a few left. Feel free to send those along so we can get everything signed and stop working at risk. But yeah, no major issues there.
Great, that sounds great. And while you're up, you want to say anything about the National Energy Code Conference that was last week?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else on this call was there. It was a good conference, and it's a 2-day conference, and the day before it, there was the ACEEE National Collaborative Conference, or seminar, I guess. It was a full-day event just on Recce projects. So I presented a 2-minute version of the project there. And then the last day of the DOE conference, Leslie helped me pull together a 10-15-minute presentation on this project. So it was a panel presentation, and the focus was on collaboratives, and a lot of good feedback. DOE also mentioned this project. It was the first example they gave of successful Recce 1 awards when they were kind of talking about the way to shape projects in the future. They liked the idea of collaboratives, and they really liked the emphasis on a resilience code and working regionally. So it's pretty exciting.
So in other words, kudos to the team. Thank you all for helping shape what is being viewed as a really great example of what DOE wants to see in this space. So Kevin, do you have anything else we want to update real quick? I didn't have anything on the agenda, but just before I hand it over to Anne, because I know, Anne, you need some substantial time to get feedback. So one of the basically deliverables we have in the project is to do surveys of the jurisdictions in the region to get a better understanding of goals, issues, etc. Anne's gotten several rounds of feedback from folks about what we'd like those surveys to entail. And so she needs to get some feedback. So please, active engagement and give your feedback to Anne. But sorry, Kevin, I jumped away from seeing if you had anything else you wanted to throw in there before.
No updates.
Okay. All right, Anne, take it away. It's all yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. I'm excited to be back up and running as a group. So we're thrilled to be able to kick this off. Thank you, Kevin and Leslie, for all of your work on that front. Really appreciate you all. So just as a way of grounding folks, my colleague Michael is actually going to lead us through some orienting slides in the survey itself. But to remind everyone, just before we paused as a group, we made the decision to kind of change the format a bit of our work. So we're issuing a brief 5-minute survey that is meant to engage jurisdictions and capture very straightforward baseline information. And then we'll be engaging in 18 in-depth interviews where we're going to gain much more context and sort of a richer perspective of regional needs and opportunities and barriers. So what we're going to share with you today is the survey itself. And so I wanted to provide that context to set Michael up for sharing that information and to just, level set on which of these instruments is meant to do what. So with that, Michael has some slides that he'll share and then can walk us through the survey. I'll put myself on mute.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to get these slides up here. Can somebody, because now I'm just seeing the presentation, confirm that you can see the slides okay?
Yep, we can see him, Michael.
Great. Okay, so jumping right in, as Anne mentioned, this is kind of what we're trying to do with the survey. It's a brief survey designed hopefully to only take 5 minutes. So as we get into the survey, keep in mind that if there are questions that we identify that are really important to add, that means we'll have to remove a question to make the time fit. And then, as Anne mentioned, it'll be followed up by 18 in-depth interviews. This gives a quick overview of our timeline. Obviously, we're here in May, wrapping up developing the survey to launch this summer, and then to bring in the interviews towards the end of the summer, early fall. here's specific dates. We're going to go through the survey today. May 28th is when we would like to have any additional feedback and comments on the survey in hand, so that we can share the final survey with the group. Are there any initial questions before I bring up the survey instrument itself? Or do you want me to go back to any slide? That was very quick. I'm seeing shaking heads. Okay. Moving-
Michael, before you move on, just confirming we're recording because we're going to get a lot of feedback. I want to make sure we're capturing it. Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for that. All right. How is the Zoom for you all? Is that enough to see everybody? Can't see you, but I will take the silence as a yes. Okay. So as
Can you increase the size a little?
oh yes. Does that work?
Thank you.
That's better.
Great. So there's some introductory language in the survey outlining our objective, which we discussed, but briefly, it's to provide outreach to the jurisdictions in Arizona and New Mexico about what this project is, and kind of get support, and then it'll have survey questions for to establish the baseline. These are our research questions regarding, and I apologize for asking this question live. I'm going to go through kind of this piece by piece. Does that make sense, Anne?
Yes, you can go for it,
Great.
Michael.
Okay, great. So getting at who are we talking to, the local jurisdiction? We want to know characteristics about their department, about their staff. And so these questions, or the questions in the survey, are designed to answer these research questions here. And then the next section is about barriers and challenges. What do folks see as barriers to code adoption and implementation? What are the resource needs of the offices? And then what needs are perhaps unique to the jurisdiction that aren't kind of cross-cutting across jurisdictions? And again, this is going out to a sample that we're identifying across Arizona and New Mexico, code development offices in municipalities and state level. So we're collaborating with Leslie to produce this language at the start, which is not included in the instrument now, but the section will include introductory language about joining the collaborative, and there'll be a offering training and certificate vouchers as part of that. So now I'll get into the questions themselves, and note, and this will be distributed for additional feedback, but we've included specific notes to guide the solicitation of feedback, but also there's some specific questions to reviewers added in comments. Are there any questions before I get into the questions themselves? Okie doke. So some of them are pretty straightforward. What is your position? We want to know who is taking the survey, and we have pre-filled options, but open-ended as well. And then we want to know what their role is within the department in a brief open-ended question. We then want to know what their jurisdiction is, because again, this is going out to Arizona and New Mexico, and the the respondents are going to be in a range of positions or a range of jurisdictions. There may be some numbering issues. I opened this up right before the call, and some of the numbering got kind of off, which we'll fix. So ignore the numbering while we go through this live. This question is to get at the characteristics of the department, whether the numbers of full-time staff, part-time staff, and whether they employ independent contractors as well. If they do answer that they have independent contractors, they'll be given this question. These codings in dark green, I maybe should have started with that, are an indication of when we code this in Qualtrics, who of the respondents will get the question that follows. So this ask all, everybody who takes the survey will get this question. Ask if Q4 they say they have a independent contractor. So if this value is anything other than 0, they will get Q5. Stop me if anything doesn't make sense or you need a little more context for any of the coding pieces as we go through this. So again, we've populated this with some options, but there is an opportunity for them to enter more areas of support. So this next question is kind of the first place we've noted where we really are looking for your input. But even if there isn't a specific call out, I encourage you to raise your hand, just speak up, because again, I can't see all of you. If there's something that doesn't make sense to include here or a call in, John, I see your hand.
Are you asking what year of the codes people are on someplace?
We do
Good.
not have that in here right now, Jonathan, but it's a good question. We'll include it.
Okay, and that could be, I'm wondering about just sort of the overall context of this question, because this is sort of getting at the scope of the particular office or person that you're talking to. So like somebody whose job it is they're only a residential plans examiner. They're probably only going to choose IRC and energy conservation codes. What's the intention? Like, what data are we trying to get out of this question?
This, which specific one, Q6?
Yeah.
The goal is ultimately to capture specifically what codes are being implemented or enforced in that jurisdiction. So we wanted to essentially capture a baseline of that information with the goal ultimately of identifying any gaps or to understand where opportunities may exist.
So it's going to be, you either have to ask more questions here, which is going to make it longer, or you'll have to do something open-ended because there's so many different codes. And like the question, ideally, if we were gathering like all of the data possible, we would ask which codes the jurisdiction has adopted. What's the what's the model year language? So it would be 2015, 2018, 2021, etc. And then if they've adopted it whole cloth, or if they've made any kinds of carve outs or overlays or adjustments.
Yeah, I don't know that the survey can get to that level of detail, Jonathan, in terms of being that comprehensive. I think what we need to do is identify the codes that we care most about in terms of what's being implemented, and then provide like a catch-all like our other specify here to capture that. So for example, to systematically go through that with every respondent would probably take 10 minutes, I would guess, to gather the level of information you're describing. Since we don't have that as an option, our goal was to identify the highest priority codes that would be of most interest to this group, and then establish whether or not folks are engaged in those. So when you're reviewing this for feedback, I think one of the things we would ask this group to do is to look at this really carefully and make sure that these pre-populated categories cover what, again, matters most to this collective. And then the other specify ideally will capture anything that we've missed in that. But I agree with you that we can add a variable to ask for the specific years to some extent. We'll have to think about how we would do that. If they ask yes, like we may be able to set this up in a grid of sorts, because this is administered online. So there's some usability things that we might be able to do to sort of reduce burden and still include some of that, but that will require some finagling. I'm sorry, Michael, I'm just jumping in here.
No,
Oh,
please.
that's good. And I see Anthony's got a question, and then after him, I actually have one for Christy.
Okay, yeah, under question 6, is there any reason why you didn't put in international in front of Energy Conservation Code, item 99?
No, there's no
No.
specific reason.
Okay, so
Think
yeah,
that.
yeah, just to be consistent with the other codes.
Yeah.
And then IECC in parentheses afterwards. But the question, the previous question 5, under the response of 99, it says site inspections, and I don't know if that's confusing because my jurisdiction, we do separate site inspections and then we do building inspections. So are we really talking about building inspections here? I know site is a generic term, but in some jurisdictions, it does mean literally site minus the building.
Mm-hmm.
No,
That's a great. Go ahead,
I-
Michael.
I was just going to say that's a great call out. So it sounds to me like that's a fifth option then that should be specified there as building inspections, because this is a select all that apply. And just so you all know, what I think I'm going to try to do is take notes separately. That way I don't muddy the document we're reviewing live with trying to make changes live. So if you don't see me changing the document, that's why I'm notating it elsewhere.
So I have a question actually for Christy. And this goes to something that Michael just put in the chat as well. So there is a lot of commonality between the jurisdictions in terms of what is adopted. I mean, there's certainly a lot of outliers. Christy, you shared a tracker that Sweeps put together that lists the codes that have been adopted in Arizona. And then we know in New Mexico, it's at the state level. So that takes some of the complication out of it. How up to date is that list?
For New Mexico or for Arizona?
For Arizona.
I think the last time I updated it was maybe December or January. So pretty recent. Yeah, I think it's pretty up to date.
So I think maybe Anne sharing that with you guys and seeing the data that we have already that's fairly current around code adoption may help think about one, how we want to frame this question to get what we need, but still take advantage of the information we already have.
Yeah, that would be extremely helpful, Christy, if you're able to share that information or that data set. We'd happily take advantage of that. And I think that also speaks somewhat to what Jonathan's question is here in the side, which is perhaps if we do have good information and data to cover what is actually being implemented, what the departments are doing, perhaps then refocusing this set of questions towards intent or what they expect folks to adopt as it relates to code. I don't know, Christy, how granular your data is. If it's, I'd have to look at it, but if there's like at the case level, if we have the level of detail by jurisdiction, or if it's aggregated in some capacity, but it would be useful to see that. And I think we could then determine if it makes sense to use that in lieu of asking it in a self-reported way.
Yeah, I've been.
It's by jurisdiction. Sorry, Leslie.
Okay.
Yeah, it's by jurisdiction.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's a pretty extensive list where I think there are some holes that Christy would admit to is the tribes. But
Okay.
from a jurisdiction perspective, because I've used, Christy shared it with me to help with kind of the narrative for the Recce 2 application. So I've actually looked at, the jurisdictions on that list versus what's incorporated in Arizona. And it's, it looks like they've done a really extensive job of capturing everything. And I think maybe then to your other point, Anne, is and what Jonathan's saying is maybe future looking is the better way to go, because if we have pretty good understanding of what they're on now, but I think we've got limited understanding of, particularly with the IECC, do they have plans to adopt one? If so, what year? That is certainly, I think, really, really important information for this project, for Recce 2, and I think some other things that are happening in the state.
And I think it's a great point. And it looks like our colleague Bahare has her hand raised to jump in.
Sure. Yes, I want to chime in and say these are all great comments, and I encourage us to go through the process. The reason we included different code, and you would see there is a list of, I want to say, more kind of key codes. We wanted to understand, compared to the number of staff, full-time and part-time staff that they have, how many codes they're implementing. It was really kind of big picture, looking at the capacity and what they do. And as we go through the guide, Jonathan, you would see that kind of from big picture, how many staff do you have? What code do you implement? And we put only kind of basic codes, the key codes. They may include all of them or only one or two of them. Then you're going to focus on energy code. You will see as we progress through the survey, we're going to kind of now ask the folks that are taking the survey, nothing of the energy conservation code. And the question that Leslie, you want to have, we can add it at the end of our thing, because we are going to actually ask them, now think about next time, only Arizona, of course, that question, next time you're trying to adapt a new code, what can help? And then we can ask them, what code are you thinking of adapting? So I encourage us to kind of see the full survey, because there was the reason we put that question, because we wanted really to compare how many staff, how many codes, as part of assessing the capacity within them. And I'm sorry that I'm only on voice, I'm nursing a headache, but I wanted to chime in that you would see that kind of logic following through as we go through the questions.
Thanks for that, Bahare. So with that, shall we keep moving forward? Thank you all very much for this discussion. This is the kind of input we're looking for. Okay, so the next series of questions are getting at the more of the characteristics of the folks in the offices and the departments. First, trying to understand what certifications, what is their expertise? And so we're specifically looking at what certifications do they have? And again, here we've input several, but are looking for additional ones. There's a note for all of the questions, really, because we don't want any individual question to be so much of a burden that it reduces kind of the value of the question. So we're limiting the choices to 10. So we're getting up to that limit here, but bear that in mind as you make suggestions of what to add. Again, you can put things in chat. It's a little tricky for me to look at chat and kind of go through here. But we are certainly recording everything in the chat.
Yeah. And Michael, I'll call things out as I see them for you. So Michael made a comment that there different jurisdictions have different responsibilities outside of building permits that may sway the number of staff questions. So I think that's an analytical question to keep in mind as we're looking at this or analyzing, and we may be able to further specify this question so that we capture those that are specifically responsible for the areas we're interested in. So we'll keep that in mind. And then Jonathan commented for Q7, it would be good to add the certifying agency for each one as well.
Right, just so I understand that, Jonathan, that's for each option, which agency is certifying or providing this certification?
Yeah, you like the BPI, right? You have them certified.
Okay.
So like who's issuing this, the commercial energy inspector certification, just for clarity.
Great. And then we have the same question, but here's where we have not yet pre-populated, so we're leaning on you more heavily for this particular question. This is training courses, specifically trainings in addition to any trainings that may be required for these certifications. We're looking for additional trainings or separate trainings that aren't tied to certifications here.
I want to add here that we added this question, but it is a question to the group. Are there training that, for example, was offered in New Mexico or Arizona from different groups that you want to actually collect data in our survey? Because you may say, training is not really important for the code baseline, and we don't need this question. That's okay too, but we put it here so we can have a conversation. And are there trainings that was offered to each state that you want to actually now check if a local jurisdiction attended or credit those in their survey?
This is, yeah, I was just wondering if we should include the ICC chapter training programs. For instance, in Arizona, we have the actually twice a year, the Education Institute, which features all sorts of classes. I know other states have them too, but it's for the building inspectors, plan reviewers, and actually architects, designers, and contractors as well attend these sessions. So I know we've tried to get certain topics covered in Arizona at those educational institutes. So I'm just wondering if that's something that should be listed as one of the options.
Great, we can include it. I'm curious to know if others agree with that. I assume, Floyd, that you're putting that to the group.
So what I'm hearing from Anthony is there are continuing education credits that are offered that code officials are taking advantage of. And those could be included in this question. But question to the group is that a kind of data that you need for code baseline study? Are those continuing credit education that are not tying to any certification or do not support any certification need to be a subject of question?
So I can chime in here. Actually, it's a question for Anthony too. The classes that you're talking about, are those different from the ASBO classes?
The ASBO classes, I'm talking about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually think those are a great, yeah, they are, to me, additional demonstration of commitment to learning about building codes and knowing more about building codes. And they do offer, topics that are pertinent to Recce. So I think I think it's a good question.
Thank you, Nina and Anthony. This is the exact kind of feedback we need and insight from the committee. Thank you. So we heard one from Anthony. If you can be kind enough actually to put the exact title on the chat so we can capture correctly. And we will update that on the file that's on the SharePoint. So when you're reviewing it, you will have that option. And we will ask reviewers to please add other trainings that need to be in that question.
I will also add that this is going to be posted, so you can, is that where you're going, Michael? This will be posted on NBI's SharePoint, so you can add more detail and comments in that draft once we have it posted for you.
And I was also actually going to make note of Jonathan's potential reframing to see if, rather than asking about trainings generally here, would it be more appropriate to frame it around continuing education experiences, or should we keep it as trainings broadly in case there are if there are trainings that fall outside of that kind of continuing education descriptor? And I guess a follow-up it also is, are those continuing education classes that you just described only Arizona? Because we can have a question such as that only appear for Arizona jurisdictions, if that's what we're really trying to ask about.
I would imagine there's some similar training in New Mexico. I'm working to get a call set up and team with New Mexico so we can just have a separate conversation about their particular needs. I was hoping Harold was going to be on the call today, but he was not able to make it, it looks like. So we'll just connect with them directly outside of this call to get answers on that.
Okay. That'd be so helpful, Leslie. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to the question about whether other training, continuing education versus the training language, I mean, it seems like there's just so much diversity of continuing education opportunities that it seems like it would be hard to have just, a certain number of options. And so, and the trainings, like the ones that Anthony was talking about in terms of our department, that is what everybody does. And so I think it is important to ask jurisdictions if they are routinely, having that training. But I don't know about, all the other options that continuing education can be done through. So I think it's good the way it is. That would be my thoughts.
I think Michael has got a good suggestion in the chat that maybe it's kind of more categorized as, does your staff participate in internal training exercises? And then maybe an example or two, or external training exercises through ASBO or ICC, or because that might be a way to lump things together that you could capture both training and continuing education. We wouldn't necessarily get the specifics of exactly what they've done, but it would give a good sense of whether they've engaged in any of these opportunities. And then we could get more specific in some of the interviews.
That's helpful feedback, Leslie and Michael.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, Jonathan's got his hand up too.
I just want to sort of build on Leslie's comment. The intention of the data of what we're trying to do with this data would be to say, 50% of building of jurisdictions support their staff with trainings, and so we're developing materials that will help those jurisdictions, and 50% don't. And so we need to convince those jurisdictions that maybe they should do some trainings. Is that sort of the intent of why we're asking this question? What's the answer to this question doing for us, or what do we want it to do for us?
I think that's a great intent that, as you've described it. Our goal is to capture information for the for this collaborative to leverage and use to customize, our end goal or end products. But I saw somebody else raise their hand. So because I think that question is actually a really good one for the group, rather than me just weighing in. And I think that was Michael. Let me see.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you're going to stick with that type of a question, then there's local trainings provided by jurisdictions and ASBO that's been talked about. Those could be discipline specific, like the Structural Engineers Association or building official general code training. But there's also national trainings, right? Like you've got the code conventions and the code hearing committees and things like that. Those are different types of training. And then there's coordinated training, like Simpson Strong-Tie will provide training for their, we've got door manufacturers that will provide door training. So those are different types of training if you're going to keep the question that way. But I think it's more relevant whether or not jurisdictions require certifications that require CEUs, and then provide opportunities for employees to get the CEUs required for those certifications, rather than if anybody attends a national ICC convention. I don't think that's really helpful information to find out, personally.
So what I'm hearing, actually, this is again great feedback. We really appreciate it. Michael, what I'm hearing is a question about, does your jurisdiction or require you to have a CEU credited certification and support you in getting your annual credits? That would be kind of a more important critical question to add. Am I hearing it correctly?
I think that would speak more to the jurisdiction's involvement in training rather than an individual and their individual desire to find training opportunities, which is what the question seems more geared towards.
Correct. That's a great input, and we appreciate it. I want to again actually add, these are really helpful because as we go through the survey, you would see that we are starting to ask about, what are the barriers? How do you feel comfortable? What is your level of understanding about code? So these kind of primary data that we are kind of collecting at the beginning, what was the jurisdiction attitude toward certification and supporting staff to get training and certification, would later help us interpret some of the data we're getting about challenges, barriers, their level of understanding. So again, thank you for feedback. And as we'll go through the survey, we'll see how maybe this data will feed into the following questions.
Okay, so this next section, as Bahari mentioned, we try to get at understanding the barriers and challenges. When respondents or folks in the jurisdictions take the survey, these kind of introductory language will inform these sections. And so they may need to be shifted, or the information will shift here to reflect kind of how the final survey shakes out. We ask about code adoption and implementation, and because implementation in this context can be a squishy concept, we define it here at the top, but also when we use the word implementation in the survey questions themselves, there'll be a floating or a mouse over definition, just to keep folks on the same page. So we want to know, and this because this varies across jurisdictions, does their office actually enforce energy code specifically? And then the respondent themselves, their role in energy code enforcement, trying to get at their expertise in energy code. Excuse me. And if they don't, who does in their office? Excuse me, I'm coming off of a cold and it's causing my throat to tickle. Okay.
I have a question.
Please.
Is it relevant to make a distinction between residential energy code enforcement and commercial?
Anthony, is it very different in Arizona and New Mexico? Are there jurisdictions that only enforce or implement one of them? We are interested to know, is there, first of all, is it important for the baseline to kind of get that differentiation? And are there jurisdictions that do either and not the other? So that's important to kind of ask about that.
Yeah, the reason I'm bringing it up is because I believe most jurisdictions in the county, my jurisdiction, there's more enforcement and understanding of the residential energy code than the commercial energy code. Commercial energy code is more sophisticated, I believe, and has a lot more depth and requirements to it, and it requires more expertise. So that's why I was thinking that perhaps there should be that distinction.
Excellent insight, actually. We didn't think about it like that on a very kind of enforcement perspective. So, Michael, I assume we can maybe, we'll actually see how we can add the residential and commercial for folks in either 2 questions or kind of a great question here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just real quick, I want to jump in, and we do need a few minutes at the end of the call for a couple of updates and next steps. So I don't know how many more questions, Michael, you have to go through. This has been a really great conversation, and I don't want to cut this off. But we're getting close to the top of the hour.
Yeah, right. So we have a number of questions. And do you want to prioritize anything, or
I would suggest, Michael, that we keep working through it, but we will call out that we are going to post this on the SharePoint site and specifically ask for feedback in that instrument. And then I think what we need to do is step back from all of these comments, look at the instrument as a whole, and discuss how we're going to refine or change according to the feedback that we've received, because it's been extremely helpful to use this instrument as a way of sort of level setting on what it is we need to learn and intend to learn. And it will probably take us another iteration to get something back to you that we feel really strongly about that is responsive. And I think, Leslie, it may be worthwhile maybe even to pull together a smaller working group to review that as a team and get aligned in that way. And then we can share it back out with the larger group. So whatever we don't cover, Michael, in the next 5 minutes, I think we can certainly cover in a smaller working group as well, based on the feedback that we received from SharePoint.
Okay, so we'll keep going. So this next question is about when a jurisdiction adopted building or energy codes. How are those new requirements? How were they informed about those new requirements? And getting at their expertise relating to energy codes. self-selecting, but it's trying to get at their comfort level or their grasp of the topic. And then so this coding means that based on our contact list, we'll be able to differentiate Arizona jurisdictions. And for only Arizona, we'll ask the adoption questions. So what are the barriers? And we're suggesting some barriers, and we're looking to you for, do they make sense as the barriers? What else can we add?
And please add if there are specific barriers, for example, of course, for adoption, it's only Arizona. So look at our list, add anything else that's not missing. But as we go to the other question about implementation that is applicable to New Mexico, tell us if there are specific contextual state or county barriers that need to be included for either state. Let us know and we'll see how we can incorporate those.
And a note on this coding is we'll have them select all that apply and then tell us the most significant. And it's a similar question for implementation specifically. And again, we'll have a definition. And then getting at what we kind of discussed before, we're asking if the jurisdiction is planning in Arizona to adopt a new energy conservation code.
This is probably where the place we will add what code they're planning after asking about it. This will be the right place.
Since we're going on to a new section, it looks like, Anne, are you okay if we kind of halt this here? I have some thoughts for maybe how to get a group together to meet on this. And since we're chatting tomorrow, we can add that to the agenda.
Absolutely. Let's plan on that. And thank you everyone for all of your feedback and really engaging in a very open dialogue around this. It's incredibly helpful, and we'll inform the group of our broader plan once Leslie and I meet as well.
Okay. Yep.
All right.
And I want to second, thank you all for contributing to the conversation, especially those of you who are the real experts in this area. So really quick, last couple of items. One, I just wanted to put back out the Recce 2 grant proposal is due 3 weeks from today. So please, 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 I'm hoping all the jurisdictions here as part of the collaborative will submit a letter of commitment. We're not asking a lot of time, certainly not an in-kind match, but your letter really does show the support for this work, and I think will be key for us actually having a chance of getting it. I do want to give a shout out. I finally got my first letter of commitment while we were meeting, and Cave Creek has signed up. So really excited because they're on 2021 IECC. They're one of the 4 jurisdictions that are. So we're starting to get some interest outside of the formal existing collaborative, which is really cool. And then in our last few minutes, and David wants to put in a plug, so I will be really, really quick about this, but got the next 3 steering committee calls. I know summer gets a little dicey with the vacations and everything, but there's a lot of stuff that we need to get input on to be able to really effectively launch things in September, early September. So there'll be beta websites, there's advisory groups that we need to stand up, probably a draft engagement plan, training schedules, meeting schedules. So all of those things will probably come up throughout the summer. Sounds like, Anne, you guys need a little more time as well. So please, if you can, make the meetings. We are creating, Jonathan's going to be creating a little website working group. If you're interested in being part of that, either put it in the chat or just shoot me an email. Did get an update from ICC that they do plan on having the 2021 IECC out by the end of this month. It's been a little delayed. There's been a lot of protests and some issues kind of reconciling that. We have a meeting on the 10th to meet with ICC about the training that we're going to provide. We're meeting with building officials. A number of you on this call are part of that, and I really appreciate it because the training is intended primarily for the building department staff, and so having input from them on the format and structure will be really valuable. And David, you're next on the list. You want to talk about the climate resilience convening?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for the time, Leslie. I really appreciate it. So next month, on June 10th, LISC Phoenix is going to be hosting a public book launch event from 1 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. This event is in conjunction with the New York Federal Reserve's What's Possible, Investing Now for Prosperous Sustainable Neighborhoods. It's a book that LISC and our partners at the New York Fed and the Wells Fargo Foundation had a hand in publishing, and it highlights the intersection of community development and climate resilience. We sent invites out to everybody on the steering committee, so check your spam folders if you didn't get it. But I will also make sure that the entire group gets a brief on this, as well as like registration links and all of that. In addition to the book launch event, and this is where the RESI work comes in, we're also going to be hosting a curated conversation the next day on June 11th, and this is going to focus on Indigenous perspectives on environmental justice and climate resilience. This convening is really vital to our RESI work as it underscores the importance of centering these voices and leadership in our efforts toward climate resilient communities. So this convening really aligns with our goal of establishing the Equity Accountability Partnership within the RESI initiative, and provides an opportunity for us to engage with Indigenous, Black, API, and Latinx communities, making sure that their voices are heard and their needs are addressed in our building code implementation efforts. And with that, that's all I have. Thanks so much, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Absolutely. And then the final kind of piece to this, for those of you who are on the core team, i.e. you have milestones, we are going to meet, our next meeting is now that everyone individually has provided their input on the shift and what works best. We want to, hopefully by then we'll have a clear direction from DOE and exactly how we need to write this in. It would be easy if we just tacked on 6 months to the end of the project, but we need the 6 months for the current budget period, which complicates things. So we're figuring that out, but our goal is to finalize that revised SOPO at that meeting, so then we could submit, and then we'll also at that meeting set the agenda for the 6/20 steering committee. And I promise next time I will not get it out the day before. So anything for the good of the order in the last minute? If not, I want to thank everyone, and please, 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 if you're a city jurisdiction or county jurisdiction, please letter of commitment on RECI 2. Really, really would appreciate that. And with that, everyone have a good day. I'll send out a follow-up email in a bit.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.